Here.
I don't know why people always say that. Okay, so we're live now, and nobody's on right now. So if you want to try to send it to your page, I'm gonna send it to mine.
Okay. Yeah, I see it. Live video.
I don't know why people always say that. Okay, so we're live now, and nobody's on right now. So if you want to try to
what is that?
send it to mine.
Okay. Yeah, I see it. Let me see. It's a little delay.
Okay, I see two people. Why people always say that? Okay, so we're live now, and nobody's on right now. So what is that?
I've turned this sound on this down.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Ifetayo Ojelade. I see several people here. If you are here for continuing education, do me a favor and then go ahead and just put your name in the chat. That way that we know that you are here. Also, just a reminder, if you are here for continuing education, I would ask that to make sure that you respond and ask questions and just engage our good morning. Is it Safali? I hope I'm saying that right, because I like people say my name right. Safali. I'm hoping I'm saying it right. Good morning. And so just make sure that you respond, share your energy with our speaker today so that we know that you are here throughout. At the very end of this session, you will get an email that will be from Beza. In that email, it will give you instructions for filling out a quiz, just a brief quiz, and then the evaluation, and you will be emailed your continuing education certificate. I am trying to do two things at once, and it is not working. I am trying to share this on my page, but maybe it's not time for me to share this on my page. Shefali. Shefali. How would you say that, Baba? Can you see the comments? Shefali on the right. Click on comments. I think it's Shefali.
Oh, okay. It's Shefali, I think. Shefali.
Shefali. Okay, Shefali. Did I say it right? Tell me yes.
The question is what language does that come from, I wonder?
Prakash, is that
the last name? Prakash.
You got it good. Okay, excellent.
What language is that?
What language is it? Shefali.
I think it's Shai. Oh, Shefali.
Shefali. Okay.
Okay, I was pronouncing the I. I was pronouncing it like it would be in some African languages.
But the Prakash, I would think that would be Indian.
Yeah, Indian.
Okay. That's what I would think. Okay, excellent.
That's what I thought, but I wasn't for sure.
Okay, so Baba. Okay, so we're gonna play this game. I call it all kinds of different things depending on who's coming, but we're gonna call it Black Love today. It's real easy, and it just allows people to know that we're normal folks. Okay.
Okay.
So here are the rules. I am going to give you a category. You're going to name 5 things in that category within 10 seconds. So I got my stopwatch ready, and in naming those things, you can't use any filler words. So no ums, uhs, ahs, no fillers.
That'll be the hardest part for me.
I know. So you just have to just like say the word. Okay. So you ready?
I'm going to try.
The category, I think this will be an easy one for you. Freedom fighters. Name 5 freedom fighters. Go.
Malcolm X, Marcus Garvey, Harriet Tubman, Ida B. Wells, Chokwe Lumumba.
You did that. 6 seconds. I think that's the quickest anybody's ever done.
I could have kept on going.
Okay. All right. So since you can keep going, let's do it a different way. Okay. So same category. You got to name 5 women. You cannot use the women that you already said.
Queen Mother Moore, Aminata Umoja, Rosa Parks, Mabel Williams. Freezing. I said Asada Shakur, Nahanda Biyadun. Fulani Suni Ali, Afeni Shakur. I'm gonna name some more. I froze. I froze like T'Challa when he saw old girl. I forgot her name.
You did excellent, Baba. So let's jump in. Resistance. In any free society, we should have the right to resist oppression, right? And in like most things in this particular society, though, there's two different worlds. There's one where European descendants are seen as having the right to resist. So if we look back at the tyranny of King George and the American Revolution, the thought was push back. Mm-hmm. Even if we look at the Civil War and the so-called idea of states' rights, push back. And if we believe the lie of a stolen election, then the Capitol insurrectionists go up to the Capitol last month and push back. The irony of that is, though, we got these two different societies. So these same people that were pushing back are the same people that seek, not just sought, that seek to deny the rights of First Nations people, people of African ancestry, our Asian brothers and sisters, essentially anybody that is non-white and that pushes against white supremacy. So if you look at the so-called American experiment, then we've got like these two things that are happening. One, where we can see that the conclusion is that white people have the right to resist. They have the right to push back. So whether that be using protests through the media, through legal means, or even violence and having the right to kill, white people have the right to resist. Everybody else, the thought is that we should be silent. So when Breonna Taylor is murdered in her bed, laying there with her man, the thought is that we should be silent and not protest, because if we protest this state-sponsored violence, we risk going to jail. Mm-hmm. So I'm asking you, and I'm asking my audience, I want you to think about this. What is the cost of being silent? Mm-hmm. What is the cost, the psychological cost of oppression and doing nothing? Mm-hmm. And I want us to begin to think about this from an opposite direction. What's the psychological implication of standing up, of resisting oppression? So today I want us to have this conversation, and I don't want us to go down the rabbit hole of trauma and all the things that are wrong, because I think that is real easy. We can do that all the time. I want us to talk about the psychological importance of us resisting. And in order for us to have this conversation, I've brought my elder on that was gracious enough to say yes when I asked him if he would have this conversation with me. He is the author of We Will Shoot Back, The Armed Resistance in the Mississippi Freedom Movement. He is also a professor of African American Studies at Georgia State University. And today I will be speaking with my elder, Dr. Akinyele Umoja. Dr. Umoja, thank you for coming today.
Thanks, Dr. Ifetayo, for having me. And thanks for allowing me to voice some of my thoughts on these questions.
So I want to start out with this first kind of question. Resistance. If we talk about resistance, can you just talk a little bit about the different types of resistance that exist?
Yeah, and I talk about in my book different forms of armed resistance, and it's broader when you think about what different types of resistance exists. Of course, most of us know, and this is African American History Month. We hear about passive resistance, nonviolent resistance. That was certainly an important part of the civil rights movement. You first had nonviolent resistance for Black folks in the 1940s in Chicago. The group Congress of Racial Equality had it. And then, of course, it was picked up by Dr. King articulating it, and then the sit-in movements and other movements, the freedom rides. So you have that nonviolent resistance. You have, I would say, intellectual resistance. That just people like yourself who are scholars, who are authors, who are artists in different ways, challenging ideas that are put out there for people to consume, and that influence people. So putting out ideas that challenge the dominant ideas. I just got through last night listening to a lecture from Molefi Asante, and of course, African-centered scholar like Molefi Asante is going to challenge the Eurocentric norms that a lot of people go by. There's armed resistance that I write about, and we will shoot back, that people utilizing force. And I kind of define armed resistance not just in terms of guns, but people use rocks, bottles, sticks. That's they use their fists or their feet. They've armed themselves to protect themselves. So people who utilize force, coercive force, but all resistance, I would say, or the most effective resistance is the resistance that doesn't allow for business to go on as usual. If no one's uncomfortable, if no one's had to change their life, then your resistance is really not, the oppressors will just ignore you, keep on moving, and things go on as usual. But another form of resistance I didn't mention, economic resistance, is when people refuse to purchase, they refuse to participate in the mainstream economy. And so you think about it. I know you mentioned elder, one of my elders that Manahochi Zano, he used to say the answer to this is none of this. So by us pulling ourselves out of the economy of the oppressors, it can have impact on them. And of course, business doesn't go on as usual. Manahochi, when he said that, though, he went beyond like our economic pulling ourselves out, but let's just pull ourselves out of their cultural traditions. Let's pull ourselves out. So when you think of example he used to give us is when you saw Gandhi. Gandhi, when he was in South Africa, if you saw the movie, he dressed like the average white professional. But then when he went back to India, he decided that he was only going to wear clothes that were made through Indian hands. Okay, so it just meant he was not going to dress like the average white guy no more, which is psychological, but it's also economic, because that would mean he's supporting Indian producers, right? Indian producers of clothes, manufacturers, whatever. Even if it was just that little cloth he was going to wear. He decided to wear that. And I remember Dr. John Henry Clark talking about how powerful that would have been if African-American civil rights folks would have resisted in that fashion. What could that have meant even in terms of our self-reliance and developing our own economies, right? And so we can resist on a variety of levels. Really, resistance is a lifestyle, can be a lifestyle. I mean, you could live your life deciding that I'm not going to comply with the oppression that's colonizing me, that's keeping me down, not only keeping me down as an individual, but keeping me down as a part of a community, a gender, or whatever. And so you can decide that you're not going to comply with that. And in every way you can, everywhere you're able to just challenge that and to live a liberated life.
You talked about also legal resistance too. I remember that's part of what you were talking about in the book, that you were saying that there was a combination of armed resistance, but then also legal resistance, like challenging laws that were keeping people from being able to vote.
Right. Well, sometimes they're interchangeable, right? In other words, I can engage myself in nonviolent resistance, which is challenging laws. I can utilize weapons to challenge the laws that exist. Challenging the laws and the policies is usually a key target for resistance, to challenge policies, to challenge the laws, and sometimes some practices are beyond the law. In other words, it might just be, it might not be coded in American law, but we can challenge it more the same. For instance, Mississippi back in the day, they would, one of the demands in some of the boycotts was we no longer want to be referred to as boy, adult people referred to as boy, girl, auntie. That's cultural change, right? And so we wanted a change in terms of how we're respected and what type of dignity we're accorded, even when it's not in the law. So again, resistance is on a variety of levels, right? And that's cultural change and cultural resistance. When we think about people just doing something as simple as practicing Kwanzaa, that's a new African, I would call, holiday, right? And so by practicing that, you kind of challenge what they say is appropriate for us to do as people of African descent. It's a form of self-determination. So anytime when you're an oppressed people, when you're use the term colonized people, that you adopt, that you accept yourself, because you're not supposed to accept yourself. I consider that a form of resistance. I changed my name when I was 18. For me, that was a form of resistance, right? It was that I was no longer going to accept the names that our former slaveholders gave us, right? And it was a struggle within the family to a certain degree for me to take on a new name, but it was something I felt was liberated, sort of inspired by, I grew up during a generation. I was a kid when Muhammad Ali or Cassius Clay became Muhammad Ali, and just trying to wrap my head around that and reading the autobiography of Malcolm X and just seeing other cultural change occur during the Black Power movement. It had an impact on me. And so I feel that's a form of resistance also, just a cultural change and doing things that are more self-determining for our people.
And one thing that you didn't necessarily talk about in this book, but I've read in an article that you've done before, is spiritual resistance. So the Haitian Revolution, and recognizing that, so part of it was armed resistance, but there was also a spiritual element in that. Can you talk a little bit about that piece?
You one of the few people read that article.
Remember, you was on my dissertation committee. So
That's right. That's right. I keep on forgetting that. Oh, Lord. But yeah, spiritual resistance is important. You think about it. Our ancestors were denied the ability to practice in the open their own spiritual traditions. And so there's